The rain came down in sheets that afternoon, turning the asphalt into a mirror of gray sky and distant headlights. Marcus stood under the awning of the convenience store, watching the water cascade off the edge in a steady stream. His shift at the warehouse had ended early, a small mercy on a day that had already worn him thin. He was supposed to meet his girlfriend, Tanya, in an hour, supposed to finally talk about the thing they'd been dancing around for weeks. But right now, all he could think about was getting home, changing into dry clothes, and maybe finding a moment of quiet before the conversation that would reshape everything. That's when he saw him. An old man, maybe 65 or 70, stumbling along the sidewalk with no umbrella, no jacket, just a thin button-down shirt that clung to his frame like wet paper. His hair, silver and sparse, was plastered against his skull. He moved with the kind of slowness that wasn't leisurely. It was the slowness of someone whose body had betrayed them. Each step looked like a negotiation. His right hand gripped his side, and even from 20 feet away, Marcus could see the tremor in his fingers. The man stopped. He swayed. For a moment, it looked like he might fall. Marcus felt something stir in his chest. Not pity exactly, something older, something his grandmother used to call the pull. When you see someone hurting, she'd say, and you feel that pull in your chest, that's God reminding you that you're still human. He didn't think, he just moved. Marcus stepped out into the rain, felt it soak through his hoodie in seconds, and crossed the distance between them. The old man was leaning against a lamppost now, eyes closed, breathing hard. Up close, Marcus could see the pallor of his skin, the blue tint around his lips. This wasn't just exhaustion. This was something worse. "Sir?" Marcus kept his voice gentle, the way you'd talk to a spooked animal. "You okay?" The man's eyes fluttered open. They were pale gray, clouded with pain and something else, something that looked like resignation. He tried to speak, but only a wheeze came out. Marcus looked around. The street was empty. The rain had driven everyone inside. He made a decision. "Come on," Marcus said, slipping an arm around the man's shoulders. "Let's get you out of this rain." The old man didn't resist. He sagged against Marcus's side, and together they made their slow, awkward way back toward the store awning. The man was lighter than Marcus expected, all bone and sinew, like a bird. They made it to the dry concrete, and Marcus eased him down to sit with his back against the brick wall. "I'm going to call 911, Marcus said, already pulling out his phone. The man's hand shot out, faster than seemed possible, and gripped Marcus's wrist. His eyes were suddenly sharp, focused, afraid. "No," he rasped, "no hospitals." Marcus hesitated. "Sir, you need help. Please." The word cracked in the middle. "Just give me a minute. I'll be fine." They looked at each other, two strangers under an awning while the world washed itself clean outside. And in that moment, Marcus had no idea that the man whose life he was about to save had once made a choice that would shatter his own. Had no idea that 28 years ago, this same man had walked out of a house on Maple Street and never looked back. Had no idea that he was staring into the eyes of the father who abandoned him. What happens when mercy and truth collide? Marcus Williams had learned early that the world didn't owe you softness. He grew up in the South End of Richmond, Virginia, in a neighborhood where hope had to fight for space between the check-cashing stores and corner liquor marts. His mother, Diane, had raised him alone, worked double shifts as a nurse at the county hospital, came home smelling like antiseptic and exhaustion, and still found the energy to check his homework and make sure he said his prayers. She never talked about his father, not really. When Marcus was young, maybe 7 or 8, he'd asked once, just once, "Mama, why don't I have a daddy?" She'd been folding laundry, her hands moving in that automatic rhythm she had, and for just a second they'd stopped. Then she'd looked at him with eyes that were somehow both hard and broken, and said, "Some people aren't built to stay, baby. That's not your fault. That's just who they are." She never said his name, never showed Marcus a picture. It was like the man had been erased from existence, leaving only an absence in the shape of a father. Marcus learned to live with that absence. He filled it with other things, basketball, books, the kind of quiet ambition that his teachers noticed but couldn't quite place. He was the kid who stayed late to help fold chairs after school assemblies, the one who walked the elderly neighbor's dog when arthritis made it too hard for her to manage. His grandmother said he had an old soul. His friends said he was too nice for his own good. "You gonna get yourself hurt one day," his best friend Jerome warned him once, "trying to save everybody." But Marcus couldn't help it. Maybe it was growing up without a father. Maybe it was watching his mother give and give and give until there was nothing left. Maybe it was just who he was. But when he saw someone struggling, he felt that pull, and he answered it. By 28, Marcus had built a small, stable life. He worked at a distribution warehouse, moving inventory and managing shipments. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work with decent pay and benefits. He had a small apartment near Churchill, a 10-year-old Honda Civic that ran more often than it didn't, and a girlfriend he was pretty sure he loved. Tanya was a teacher at the elementary school where his mother used to volunteer. She had a laugh that could fill a room, and a way of seeing the best in people even when they couldn't see it in themselves. They'd been dating for 2 years. Lately, she'd been leaving bridal magazines on his coffee table. Lately, he'd been pretending not to notice. It wasn't that he didn't want to marry her. It was that he didn't know if he knew how. How do you build a family when you've never seen one built right? How do you promise to stay when the only model you had walked away? These were the thoughts circling Marcus's mind as he stood under that awning, watching an old man struggle to breathe. The rain continued its steady percussion against the pavement. Inside the store, a clerk was watching them through the window, phone in hand, deciding whether to call someone. Marcus gave him a thumbs up, trying to signal that everything was under control. Everything was not under control. "What's your name?" Marcus asked, crouching down to eye level. The old man's breathing had evened out a little, but his color was still off. "Robert," he said quietly. "Robert Jenkins." "Okay, Robert, I'm Marcus. Can you tell me what's going on? Are you in pain?" Robert nodded slowly. "My chest started about a mile back. Thought I could make it home." "Where's home?" "Oakwood, the shelter on Oakwood." Marcus's heart sank. He knew that shelter. He'd volunteered there a few times with his church. It was a last resort kind of place, the kind where men went when they'd run out of everywhere else to go. "That's 4 miles from here," Marcus said gently. "You can't walk that, not like this." "Don't have money for a cab." Robert's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. This was just how things were. Marcus sat back on his heels, thinking. He looked at his phone, 6:47 p.m. He was supposed to meet Tanya at 7:30. If he left now, he could just make it. He looked at Robert, at the way the old man held his side, at the tremor that wouldn't stop. "Come on," Marcus said, standing and offering his hand. "My car's around the corner. I'll drive you." Robert stared at the offered hand like it was a foreign object. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to, but I'm going to." Marcus kept his hand extended. "Come on, Robert. Let me help you." Something shifted in Robert's face. His eyes went bright with moisture that had nothing to do with the rain. Slowly, carefully, he reached up and took Marcus's hand. And maybe, if either of them had been paying attention to the particulars, to the shape of Robert's hands, the set of his jaw, the way his left eye squinted slightly when he was thinking, they might have noticed the similarities. But they weren't looking for connections. They were just 2 men trying to get out of the rain. Marcus pulled Robert to his feet, and together they made their way toward the corner where Marcus's Civic sat waiting. The rain had started to ease, thinning to a drizzle that hung in the air like mist. Robert moved slowly, each step deliberate, and Marcus matched his pace without complaint. When they reached the car, Marcus helped Robert into the passenger seat, made sure he was buckled in, then jogged around to the driver's side. The interior smelled like the cinnamon air freshener Tanya had bought him, mixed with the wet dog scent of rain-soaked upholstery. Marcus turned the key, cranked the heat, and pulled out onto the empty street. "Thank you," Robert said quietly, his voice almost lost beneath the rumble of the engine. "You didn't have to do this." "It's okay," Marcus replied, eyes on the road. "Everybody needs help sometimes." He didn't know that these words, this small moment of kindness, would become the axis on which his entire world would turn. He didn't know that in helping a stranger, he was stepping into a story that began before he was born. He didn't know that the truth was riding shotgun, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The drive to Oakwood should have taken 15 minutes. Marcus stretched it to 25, taking the long way through the quieter neighborhoods, giving Robert time to catch his breath. They didn't talk much at first. The wipers made their rhythmic sweep across the windshield. The radio played low, something soft and instrumental that filled the silence without demanding attention. Robert sat with his head tilted back against the seat, eyes closed, one hand still pressed to his ribs. "You should really see a doctor," Marcus said after a while. "Chest pain isn't something to mess with." "Can't afford it." Robert's eyes stayed closed. "No insurance, no money. Story old as time." Marcus wanted to argue, but what would he say? He knew how it worked. He'd seen it with his own mother, the way medical bills could swallow a person whole, the impossible choice between health and everything else. The system wasn't built for people like Robert, wasn't built for people like his mother, wasn't built for people like him, really, though he'd been lucky enough to land a job with benefits. "What about the emergency room?" Marcus tried. "They have to see you, at least." "And then what?" Robert's voice carried an edge now, sharp with the kind of exhaustion that went deeper than physical. "They patch me up, send me a bill for $5,000, and I spend the next 10 years dodging collections calls?" He opened his eyes, turned to look at Marcus. "I appreciate what you're doing, son, really, but some problems don't have solutions. They just have endings." The words hung heavy in the small space. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter, jaw working. He wanted to argue, wanted to insist that there was always a way, always hope, but he'd lived long enough to know that wasn't true. Sometimes people fell through the cracks. Sometimes the world just watched them fall. "How'd you end up at the shelter?" Marcus asked, more to change the subject. Robert was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had gone soft, distant. "Long story. The short version is I made some bad choices. Lost my family, lost my job, lost my way." He paused. "Thought I could start over somewhere else. Turns out geography doesn't fix what's broken inside you." Marcus knew he should leave it alone, knew he was treading close to something raw and private. But something in Robert's voice called to something in him, that same pull he'd felt back at the convenience store. "How long's it been," Marcus asked quietly, "since you saw your family?" 28 years. The answer came quick, like Robert had the number memorized. 28 years, 4 months, and, he trailed off, calculating, 16 days. The specificity of it struck Marcus like a physical thing. 28 years. Marcus was 28 years old. A strange feeling moved through his chest. Not quite suspicion, not quite recognition. Just a sense of something hovering just out of reach, like a word on the tip of your tongue. "That's a long time," Marcus said carefully. "Too long," Robert's voice cracked. "Way too long." They turned onto Oakwood Avenue. The shelter was a converted church building, red brick and peeling paint, with bars on the lower windows and a hand-painted sign that read, New Beginnings Haven. Marcus had always thought the name was either supremely hopeful or cruelly ironic. He pulled into the small parking lot, put the car in park, but didn't turn off the engine. Robert reached for the door handle, then stopped. He turned to Marcus, and in the dim light from the dashboard, his face looked ancient and young at the same time. "Why'd you help me?" Robert asked. "You don't know me. I could have been anybody." Marcus considered the question. It was one he'd asked himself 100 times over the years. Why did he stop? Why did he care? Why did he let other people's pain become his own? "My mama raised me to believe that kindness matters," he said finally. "That what we do for each other is the only thing that lasts." He met Robert's eyes. "Maybe I helped you because somebody helped her once. Maybe it's just how I'm wired. I don't know. But when I saw you out there in the rain—" He paused, searching for the right words. "I guess I just saw somebody who needed not to be alone." Robert's face crumpled. Just for a second, a flash of something deep and wounded. Then he pulled it back together, swallowing hard. "Your mother raised you right," he whispered. "Yeah," Marcus agreed softly. "She did." Robert opened the door, started to climb out, then stopped again. He looked back at Marcus, seemed to wrestle with something, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From inside, he extracted a small folded piece of paper, old and creased, like it had been opened and closed 1,000 times. "Here," Robert said, holding it out. "I want you to have this." Marcus took it, confused. "What is it?" "Just something I've been carrying for a long time. Maybe it's time somebody else held on to it." Robert's smile was sad, broken. "Thank you, Marcus. You gave me something today I didn't think I'd ever have again." "What's that?" "Hope that there are still good people in the world." Before Marcus could respond, Robert climbed out of the car and shut the door. He stood for a moment in the drizzle, seemed to steel himself, then turned and walked toward the shelter entrance. Marcus watched him go, watched the slow, painful way he moved, the way he held himself like he was trying to take up as little space as possible. The door opened. Robert disappeared inside. Marcus sat there for a long moment, engine idling, the piece of paper still folded in his hand. Finally, curiosity got the better of him. He unfolded it carefully, mindful of its obvious age.
It was a photograph. Old, faded, the colors leached to pastels by time. It showed a young woman, maybe 25, standing in front of a house with white siding and a red door. She wore a summer dress, yellow with small flowers, and she was laughing at whoever held the camera. In her arms was a baby, maybe 6 months old, reaching for something beyond the frame. Marcus's breath stopped. He knew that house, knew that red door. He'd grown up behind it. He knew that woman, that laugh, those eyes. It was his mother, 28 years younger, but unmistakably her. And the baby? His hand started to shake. He flipped the photo over. On the back, in faded blue ink, someone had written, "Diane and Marcus, May 1997. My whole world." The handwriting was shaky, unpracticed, like someone had written it while crying. Marcus's mind was racing, trying to catch up, trying to make sense of what he was holding. Robert Jenkins, 28 years since he'd seen his family. The same age as Marcus. The photo of his mother? The baby? My whole world. "No," Marcus whispered to the empty car. "No, that's not—" But even as he said it, he was seeing it. The similarities he hadn't noticed before.
The same broad shoulders. The same way of holding his hands. The same slight squint in the left eye. Details his mind had filed away without comment, suddenly rearranging themselves into a picture he didn't want to see. Robert Jenkins. His mother's maiden name had been Anderson. She'd never mentioned anyone named Jenkins. But then she'd never mentioned his father at all. What if she'd wanted to erase him so completely that she'd never even spoken his name? Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Tanya. "Where are you? Everything okay?" He stared at the message, couldn't process it. His entire reality was recalibrating. Every memory, every assumption about who he was and where he came from, suddenly suspect. He'd just driven his father to a homeless shelter. He'd just shown kindness to the man who'd abandoned him. The man who'd left his mother to raise a child alone. Who'd turned his back on them both. Who'd been gone so long that Marcus had learned to think of him as a ghost, a absence, a empty space where a father should have been. And Marcus had helped him. The irony was so sharp it almost felt like violence. He should go, should drive away and never think about this again. Robert, his father, clearly didn't recognize him. Why would he? He'd left when Marcus was barely old enough to hold his head up. He had no idea that the kind stranger who'd given him a ride was the son he'd abandoned. Marcus could just let it stay that way. Walk away. Let Robert Jenkins remain a stranger. But even as he thought it, he knew he wouldn't. Couldn't, because beneath the shock, beneath the anger that was just starting to kindle in his chest, there was something else. Questions. So many questions. Why did you leave? Where have you been? Did you ever think about us? Did you ever regret it? Did you ever love us at all? 28 years of questions, packed down and sealed away, suddenly demanding answers. Marcus looked at the shelter entrance, looked at the photograph in his hands, looked at his phone, at Tanya's message waiting for a response. He made a decision. He turned off the engine, pocketed his keys, and got out of the car. The rain had stopped completely now. The air smelled clean, washed. Marcus walked toward the shelter entrance, each step feeling both too fast and too slow. His heart hammered against his ribs. What was he doing? What was he going to say? He didn't have answers. He just had the pull. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the shelter had that particular smell of institutional spaces. Industrial cleaner, old coffee, too many people in too small a space. A woman sat at a desk near the entrance, middle-aged with tired eyes and a kind smile. "Help you?" she asked. "I'm looking for someone," Marcus said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "Robert Jenkins. He just came in." She consulted a clipboard. "Robert, yeah, he's checked in. You family?" Marcus hesitated. The word felt too big and too small at the same time. "Yeah," he said finally, "I'm family." The lie, or was it a truth, sat heavy on his tongue. "He's in the common area," the woman said, pointing down a hallway. "Through those doors, first room on the left." Marcus nodded his thanks and walked down the hallway. His shoes squeaked on the linoleum. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. He felt like he was moving through a dream, or maybe a memory that hadn't happened yet. The common area was a large room with folding tables and plastic chairs, a television mounted on the wall playing the evening news with the sound off. Maybe a dozen men were scattered throughout, some eating, some talking quietly, some just sitting and staring at nothing. Robert sat alone at a table near the window, a cup of coffee in front of him, still wearing his damp shirt. He looked up when Marcus walked in. For a moment, confusion flickered across his face, then concern. "Marcus, is everything okay?" Marcus crossed the room, stood beside the table. He pulled out the photograph, laid it gently on the surface between them. Robert looked down. His face went white. "Where did you—" His voice failed. He reached for the photo with shaking hands, touched it like it might dissolve. "You gave it to me," Marcus said quietly, "in the car." "I did?" Robert looked genuinely confused. I wasn't thinking. I didn't mean to." He stopped, really looked at the photo, then looked up at Marcus. His eyes went wide. Oh, God! Oh, God, no! Recognition, finally, dawning across Robert's face like a slow horror. "Marcus," Robert breathed. "Marcus Williams, Diane's son. You're—" He couldn't finish, just stared, the photograph trembling in his hands. "Yeah," Marcus said. His voice came out harder than he intended. "I am your son." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and irrevocable. Robert stood up so fast his chair scraped backward. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know it was you." I was backing away, shaking his head. "I should go. I should—" "Sit down." Marcus's voice carried command, authority he didn't know he possessed. "Please, just sit down." Robert froze, caught between flight and obedience. Finally, slowly, he sank back into his chair. Marcus pulled out the chair across from him, sat down. They faced each other across the scarred plastic table. "How is she?" Robert asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your mother. How is Diane?" "She's dying." The words came out flat, factual. Marcus hadn't meant to lead with that, hadn't meant to use it as a weapon, but that's what it became. He watched his father, crumble. "What?" "Cancer. Stage 4. Pancreatic. They gave her 6 months. That was 4 months ago." Marcus kept his voice level, clinical. "It was the only way to get through this. She's in hospice now, home care. I visit her every day after work." Robert's face had gone gray. I had no idea." "How would you?" Marcus shot back. "You haven't been there. You haven't been anywhere." "I know." Robert's voice broke. "I know." They sat in silence. The television flickered in the background. Someone laughed at another table, a harsh, bitter sound. "Why?" Marcus finally asked. The question that had lived in him for 28 years. "Why did you leave?" Robert closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. "I was scared," he said simply. "I was 23 years old. I had a new wife and a baby, and no job, and no money, and no idea how to be a father. My own dad had been—" he gestured vaguely, "not good. And I thought, I can't do this. I'm going to mess this kid up. I'm going to fail them both. And the fear just ate me alive."
"So I ran." Robert's voice was hollow. "Told myself it was for the best, that you and Diane would be better off without me, that I was doing you a favor." He laughed, a painful, broken sound. "Isn't that something? I abandoned my family and convinced myself it was noble." Marcus wanted to be angry, wanted to rage, but all he felt was tired. "You weren't doing us a favor. You were making a choice. You chose yourself." "I know." Robert pressed his palms against his eyes. "I know. And I've lived with that choice every single day for 28 years. There hasn't been a moment, not one, when I didn't think about you, about her, about what I threw away." "Then why didn't you come back?" The question ripped out of Marcus. "If you thought about us so much, if you regretted it, why didn't you come back?" "Because I was a coward." Robert dropped his hands, met Marcus's eyes. "Because the longer I stayed away, the easier it got to tell myself it was too late, that I'd done too much damage, that coming back would only hurt you more." He shook his head. "I didn't know that was just another lie I told myself, another way of choosing the easy path." Marcus looked at him, really looked at him, saw the gray hair, the worn face, the cheap, damp clothes, saw the way his hands shook, the way he held his body like it hurt.
This was his father. This broken, homeless, regretful man was the shadow that had haunted his whole life. "She never spoke about you," Marcus said quietly. "Not once. I asked her one time when I was little, and she said, 'Some people aren't built to stay.' That was it. Your name, your face, you just didn't exist." Robert flinched. "Can't blame her for that." "I don't." Marcus paused. "But I blamed you. My whole life, I blamed you." "You should. Maybe." Marcus looked down at the photograph, still lying on the table. His mother's young face smiled up at him. "Or maybe blame is just another way of carrying you with me." They sat with that for a moment. "Does she—" Robert's voice was hesitant. "Does she ever mention me? Does she hate me?" Marcus considered lying, considered sparing this man the truth. But he'd spent too much of his life with absences and silences. "I don't know if she hates you," he said honestly, "but I know she survived you. She worked 2 jobs and raised me alone and never once made me feel like I was missing anything. She made sure I knew I was loved. That's more than you did." Robert nodded slowly. A tear tracked down his cheek. "She was always the strong one. I knew she'd be okay." "Being strong doesn't mean you weren't hurt." Marcus's voice was sharp. "It just means you didn't have a choice." The truth of it settled between them. "What are you going to do?" Robert asked finally. "Now that you know, are you going to tell her? Tell her you found me?" Marcus hadn't thought that far ahead. He'd been operating on instinct, on that pull that had led him here. But now, faced with the question, he realized he didn't have an answer. "I don't know," he admitted. "She's got maybe 2 months left, maybe less. I don't know if telling her would give her peace or just open old wounds." "Don't tell her." Robert's voice was firm, urgent. "Please, let her have her peace. She doesn't need to know that I ended up like this." He gestured at himself, at the shelter around them. "Let her remember me however she wants, or not at all. That's what I deserve." Marcus studied his father's face, saw the shame there, the self-loathing. "Is that what you want? To stay disappeared?" "What I want doesn't matter anymore." "Maybe it does." Marcus surprised himself with the words. "Maybe that's what I came here to find out." Robert looked at him with something like hope, and it made Marcus's chest tight. How strange, he thought, to hold your father's hope in your hands, to have the power to grant or deny forgiveness, to decide who gets to be redeemed.
"I don't forgive you," Marcus said, and watched that hope flicker. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. You don't get absolution just because you feel bad about what you did." Robert nodded. "I understand. But," Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully, "but I think I'd like to know you. The real you. Not the ghost my mother erased, and not the villain I made up in my head. Just you. However much time you've got left." Robert stared at him. "Why would you want that?" "Because you're dying, too." Marcus said it gently, but without softness. "That's what that chest pain is, isn't it? That's why you won't see a doctor. You know something's wrong." Robert was quiet for a long moment. "Heart disease," he said finally. "Diagnosed 3 years ago. Can't afford medication, can't afford treatment. So, yeah, I'm dying. Slowly but surely." "Then maybe," Marcus said, "we both deserve to know our fathers before they're gone." The words hit Robert like a physical blow. He bent forward, shoulders shaking, and started to cry, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from someplace ancient. Marcus sat there, watching, and felt his own throat tighten. This wasn't the reunion he'd imagined as a kid.
There was no music swelling, no perfect reconciliation. Just two damaged people sitting in a homeless shelter, trying to find their way to something that might, someday, in some small way, resemble forgiveness. Marcus reached across the table and took his father's hand. It was the first time they'd touched in 28 years. 3 weeks later, Marcus sat in his mother's hospice room, holding her hand while she slept. The room was peaceful. Soft light through gauze curtains, the gentle hum of machines, flowers on the windowsill that Tanya had brought yesterday. His mother looked smaller than he remembered, like the disease was erasing her inch by inch. But her face was peaceful. That was something. He'd been coming every day, sometimes twice a day, stealing hours from work, from sleep, from his life. Tanya understood. She always understood. They'd had the talk he'd been avoiding, the one about marriage and commitment and forever, and she'd looked at him with those kind eyes and said, "I'm not going anywhere, Marcus. Take the time you need." He wondered if she knew she was teaching him what staying looked like. The photograph sat in his wallet now, creased and worn. He'd showed it to Robert the second time they met, a week after that first night. They'd gotten coffee, Marcus's treat, and sat in a booth at a diner while Robert told him stories. About meeting Diane at a community college dance. About the tiny apartment they'd shared. About holding Marcus for the first time and feeling terrified and amazed in equal measure. "You had these eyes," Robert said, smiling at the memory. "Even as a baby, you'd just stare at people like you were trying to figure them out. Diane used to say you were born paying attention." They met twice more after that. Short visits, careful conversations. Marcus bought Robert new clothes, a warm jacket, made sure he had food. He'd tried to talk him into seeing a doctor, but Robert refused. "Some things," he said, "you just have to let run their course." Marcus understood. He was watching his mother do the same thing. He hadn't told her about Robert. Maybe he would, if the right moment came. Maybe he wouldn't. Some truths, he was learning, were for the living to carry. His mother stirred, opened her eyes, saw him, and smiled. That same smile from the photograph, only softer now, gentler, earned. "Hey, baby," she whispered. "Hey, Mama." He squeezed her hand. "How you feelin'?" "Tired." She always said that. "But good. Good that you're here." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Diane spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "I've been thinking about forgiveness lately." Marcus's heart stuttered. "Yeah?"
Yeah. She looked out the window at the sky beyond. All the grudges we carry, all the hurt we hold on to. I used to think that was strength, holding people accountable, not letting them off the hook. She turned back to him. But now I think maybe forgiveness isn't about them at all. Maybe it's about putting down weight you weren't meant to carry forever. Marcus felt his throat tighten. What brought this on? "Oh, I don't know. End-of-life clarity, maybe?" She smiled. "Or maybe I'm just tired of being angry, even at people who deserve it." He knew she was talking about his father, even if she wouldn't say it. "Do you forgive him?" Marcus asked quietly. "Dad?" She was quiet for so long he thought she might have fallen back asleep. Then, "I'm working on it. For me, not for him. Because I want to go, wherever I'm going, without that weight." Her eyes found his. "You should too, baby. Whatever anger you carry about him, it's yours to put down when you're ready." "I'm not sure I know how." "Start small." She squeezed his hand with what little strength she had. "Start with understanding that hurt people, that sometimes the people who fail us were failed first, and that carrying their sins doesn't make you righteous, it just makes you tired." Marcus thought about Robert in that shelter, about the way he'd cried, about the photograph he'd carried for 28 years, like a prayer or a punishment. "He's still alive," Marcus said. The words came out before he could stop them. Diane went very still. "What?" "Dad, his name is Robert Jenkins. He's homeless, sick,
living in a shelter on Oakwood. I met him 3 weeks ago. Didn't know who he was at first. Then he gave me a photograph and—" Marcus trailed off. "I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't have told you." His mother's face was unreadable. She stared at him for a long moment, processing. Then, slowly, she started to laugh, soft and sad and somehow free. "Of course you did," she said. "Of course you found him. You can't help but see people who need saving. I didn't save him. Maybe not. But you saw him. That's half of saving someone. Just seeing them when everyone else looks away." She closed her eyes, took a breath. Is he okay?" "No," Marcus said honestly. "But he's trying. And I think—" he paused, finding the words. "I think I might try too. To know him. Not to fix what's broken, but just to know him." Diane opened her eyes, looked at her son with something that might have been pride. "You're a better person than either of us," she whispered. "You know that? I learned from the best." She smiled, and it was the smile from the photograph, young and full of hope. Tell him I'm glad he's still here, that I hope he finds some peace." She paused. "And tell him, he did fail us, but he gave us you, and you are the best thing I've ever done." Marcus felt tears track down his face. "I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. So much." She closed her eyes again. Within minutes, she was asleep. Marcus sat there, holding her hand, and thought about fathers and sons and the strange mathematics of forgiveness, about how helping a stranger in the rain could unravel 28 years of silence, about how mercy and truth didn't have to be enemies. They could be the same thing, viewed from different angles. He pulled out his phone, sent a text to the number Robert had given him. "She knows. She says she's glad you're still here." The response came 5 minutes later. "Thank you. For everything. You're a good man, Marcus. Better than I ever was." "I'm trying to be," Marcus typed back. "Come by the house Saturday. I'll make lunch. We can talk more." "I'd like that." Marcus pocketed his phone, looked at his sleeping mother, and felt something shift in his chest. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of understanding. The first small step toward putting down weight he'd carried his whole life.
Outside the window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Another day ending. Another day survived. Marcus thought about the photograph in his wallet, about his mother's young face and his infant self, reaching for something beyond the frame, about his father holding the camera, capturing a moment of happiness he'd later abandon. Maybe that was the real story, Marcus thought. Not the abandonment, but the reaching, the constant human impulse to grasp for connection even when we don't know how to hold on to it. He would try, with his mother in the time she had left, with Robert in whatever time they could find, with Tanya, with his life, with the future that was still unwritten. He would try to be the kind of person who stopped in the rain, who saw strangers as human, who believed in the possibility of redemption, even when it was hard-won and incomplete. He would try to honor what his mother had given him, not perfection, but presence, not a complete family, but a whole heart. That night, after leaving the hospice, Marcus drove to the shelter. Robert was sitting on the front steps, wearing the jacket Marcus had bought him, looking up at the stars. Marcus sat down beside him. "Hey," Marcus said. "Hey," Robert replied. They sat in silence, two men bound by blood and absence, and the strange, stumbling attempt to build something from ruins. "Thank you," Robert said finally, "for not letting me stay invisible." Marcus thought about that, about visibility and recognition, about how sometimes the greatest kindness we can offer is simply to see each other, truly, not as we wish we were, or as we should have been, but as we actually are.
"Thank you for the photograph," Marcus said, "for carrying us with you, even when you were gone." Robert nodded, tears on his face again. "Always," he whispered. "I always carried you." They sat together under the stars, father and son, and watched the night sky turn. So here's the question that haunts me about this story. What would you have done? If you'd stopped to help a stranger in the rain, and then discovered that stranger had shaped your entire life by their absence, would you have stayed? Would you have driven away? Would you have sought revenge, or understanding, or simply closure? Marcus chose mercy, not because Robert deserved it, but because Marcus deserved to be free. He chose to see his father not as a villain or a ghost, but a broken human being who'd made terrible choices and lived with the consequences. He chose to understand that forgiveness isn't about erasing harm. It's about refusing to let that harm define you forever. His mother died 6 weeks after that conversation. Robert came to the funeral, stood in the back, and left before anyone could ask who he was. But Marcus saw him. And that night, they had dinner together for the first time as father and son. It wasn't perfect. It was never going to be perfect. But it was real. And sometimes, real is all we get. This story is about the choices we make when no one is watching, about the small acts of kindness that ripple outward in ways we can't predict, about how sometimes the people we help are helping us right back, just by letting us practice being human. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own absences, your own capacity for mercy, your own complicated relationships with forgiveness, then do me a favor, share it. Not because I need the views, but because somebody else might need the reminder that it's never too late to try, to reach out, to see someone, to be seen. And if you want more stories like this, stories that dig into the messy, complicated truth of what it means to be human, hit that subscribe button. Because every week, we're going to explore another moment where justice, mercy, and truth collide. The question isn't when we'll face these moments. We will. The question is what we'll choose when we do. Marcus chose to stop in the rain. What will you choose